Well, that was quick. Okay, did I sleep in a little too long? Because I thought the iPhone 13 was dropping next week. Now we're talking about 14. But basically, John Prosser from Front Page Tech dropped a huge leak bomb on us on what to expect for next year's iPhone. There's a bit to unpack that I'll be diving into today. Let's begin. So I've reported on Prosser's leaks in the past, and I think it's safe to say it's oftentimes a toss-up. You know, I recall him telling us about 120 hertz last year, and AirPower, and AirPod Studio having USB-C, but I'll give him credit. He got the colorful iMac leak correct. He got the iPhone SE launch date totally spot on before everybody else. He got the AirTags design out there, so safe to say when we're this far away from an iPhone launching, literally like over a year, there's a lot of things that can change. That's why in today's video, I mainly want to taper expectations based on, okay, these are the leaks we're getting, this is what we're hearing from different sources, and also saying what makes sense, what actually lines up with what Apple has done in the past, and what logically could Apple end up churning out within 12 months. So first of all, let's just talk about some of the changes. That we've got a titanium chassis, which was reported on a few months back by JP Morgan, as well as a punch hole camera in replacement of the notch, which Ming-Chi Kuo was talking about ever since March of this year. Ming-Chi Kuo, though, I will agree, has been a tad more spotty when it comes to the notch. I recall years ago him saying, yeah, the notch is going to shrink next year, the notch is going to shrink next year, and it didn't time and time again. It sounds like the iPhone 13 is finally actually going to have a smaller notch, but we've been hearing that report like 3 years in a row. So forgive me for having a few doubts of my own. Hopefully we finally get a smaller one next week. Not that I feel like it really makes that big a difference, but probably the biggest exclusive leak that John dropped is the no camera bump for the 14 Pro and Pro Max. I'm assuming that similar to Ming-Chi Kuo, he's suggesting the regular models, the 14 and maybe 14 mini, but I've also seen a lot of reports suggesting that there will be a cheaper Max option next year, so an iPhone that's perhaps under $1,000 that still has a 6.7-inch display. I don't know if that's been finalized yet, but those cheaper iPhones allegedly would still have the notches that the iPhone 13 is going to have. But wow, may I just say the amazing renders by Ian, which are incredible in detail and showcase the amazing front of the iPhone, makes me realize that, holy crap, you know, if we went with the punch hole camera, this iPhone would blend in literally with every other Android in the world. Given how many freaking Android phones out there have this exact same footprint, you know, rectangular curved corners in the camera hole. Not that I'm saying we should keep the notch just for the sake of being iconic and different, but man, won't the smartphone world look very, very different when that day comes. I'll just go ahead and repeat what Ross Young was already posting on Twitter, which is that he's hearing Apple's in talks with supply chains to try to do under-display Face ID so that the TrueDepth camera system, you know, the IR reader and the dot projector and all that could be underneath the display, but the selfie camera itself would still be a punch hole because under-display cameras aren't performing very well yet. However, I will mention that the bigger problem I have with under-display cameras is not so much that it craps out on the camera quality, especially with the Z Fold 3. I think the bigger complaint I have is the pixelation. Whenever you put sensors behind a display, you have to kind of compromise on the display quality. You have to make it a tad more pixelated, and from what we've seen on cameras that are under display so far, it looks kind of tacky to me. It almost looks like a malfunction with the display. I'd almost go as far as to say I would rather have a notch than a pixelated area of the phone around the camera hole where it's like, okay, you can still have data up there, but it's not going to be very readable. So if you want your battery indicator to come back, it probably won't. And when you're watching content or doing anything on that part of the display, you'll noticeably be able to tell it's a tad less pixelated, it's not as rich. And companies like Samsung and Xiaomi, I expect them to be comfortable having a pixelated, kind of distorted area of the display. But knowing Apple, personally, I feel like that's the type of thing they would say, this tech isn't mature, this tech isn't ready yet. So my prediction is Apple's not going to be putting any sensors underneath the display until they find a way for the display quality to not be compromised on. They don't want any of that pixelation up there. They know it would look weird, and they would have to shoehorn it into the marketing ads just like Galaxy Z Fold 3 did. And of course, the important thing to keep in mind is we are nowhere close to iPhone 14 mass production season. There may be some general footprints that are set in stone and some general milestones Apple is hoping to achieve next year, but technically the design could change a lot within the next 6 months because Apple has plenty of time before they have to actually start mass producing these things. So that's why I would definitely not assume and count on there being a punch hole camera next year. And kind of the same thing with the camera bump. This would be awesome because I hate camera bumps, obviously, but I really don't see any motivation for Apple to get rid of it. I mean, ever since they first introduced it in 2014, the camera bump has literally only gotten bigger over the past 7 years. Yeah, the tiny one with the 6 and 6S, then it got bigger with the 7, then it got bigger with the 10, then it got bigger with the 11, and with the 12 Pro Max, and now the 13 Pro Max, we're having bigger camera modules than we've ever had before that are sticking out further than ever before, and the idea that just so happens next year they suddenly start caring about the camera bump, I find a little less likely. Also, Apple knows most people wear cases, so the idea that, oh, the phone rocks too much when you put it down on a table, Apple probably sees that as a great selling point. Well, why don't you pick out one of our great $50 silicone cases, or even better, our super expensive leather cases, and that way Apple gets you to spend more money on your trip to the Apple store. The cases fix the rocking problem, and I'm pretty sure like over 80% of iPhone users wear cases anyway, so I agree it would be nice if Apple decided to balloon up the entire size of the phone, give it a bigger battery so that the cameras were flush and didn't protrude so much, but they've just never shown that to be the interest, and they could have done it at any time in the past 7 years, and they've intentionally chose not to, even though they totally could have, which is I guess why I have a little bit of a hard time believing that aspect of the report. I get that they're going for like an iPhone 4 designed approach here with the circular volume buttons, but I think there was a very obvious reason they got rid of those. People were complaining that the volume buttons are very hard to reach and very hard to feel for, and taking volume buttons that small on a phone this large is just going to make them even more awkward and uncomfortable to feel for, so I don't think Apple's just going to ditch the traditional volume rocker for the sake of, well, it'll look like the iPhone 4 volume rocker, because in that case, bring back the home button while you're at it. Also, the type of speaker grill in this leak is very, very difficult to make water resistant, so I think that John is essentially looking at a very, very early prototype of the iPhone 14, and frankly, this prototype might not even have Face ID sensors, it might just be the camera on the front, and it may not have the latest and greatest cameras they're planning for the iPhone 14, so because of that, I'm worried that a lot of people are going to get really excited and really pumped, and I get it, it's exciting to imagine and gives me a lot of adrenaline to imagine, oh my god, Apple's going to do everything we've ever wanted in a single upgrade, but especially when leaks are this far out, whether it's a very reliable leaker or a very spotty one, they are usually not very accurate. So please, temper expectations a little bit and try to look at these as more so, here's what Apple is currently prototyping, here's what they're working on, it is not a guarantee, it is not a promise, it does not mean for sure this is what's going to happen, because I mainly just don't want a bunch of people going into next year assuming a bunch of things, because I feel like I've seen this exact scenario play out year after year after year. iPhones are about to launch and everyone's talking about how this isn't that big an upgrade, this isn't such a big deal, I think next year's gonna be better, let's wait for next year, and then next year rolls around, and guess what? Throughout the year, we keep getting more and more doses of reality, where we get another report that says, oh, actually, you know, that flat camera thing, I don't think that's gonna work until next year, so the 14 actually will have a camera bump, and then a couple months later, we hear, actually, the iPhone 14, they can't get the under-display Face ID working correctly, we're probably gonna have a notch with the iPhone 14. A couple more months go by, and before you know it, it's just as small an upgrade as the iPhone 12 to 13 is, but you're hearing a bunch of crazy and exciting reports about how exciting the iPhone 15 is, so you decide to wait for that. End result is you just don't buy anything, and you can't decide when to buy something because the leaks are just kind of confusing you, so here's hoping as many of these leaks are correct as possible, because I want it to be true. I'd love titanium on an iPhone, I hate the steel glossy sides on the Pro Maxes, but am I going to delay my 13 Pro Max purchase, which I'm planning on keeping for many, many years, by the way, just in preparation of the iPhone 14 allegedly being far more exciting? No. I think we should buy based on what we know, not so much what is rumored to come out from people that may or may not know what the future holds. The truth is, Apple doesn't even know, so why would we base our buying decisions off that? Anywho, let me know what you guys think of the iPhone 14 design. Should we believe these rumors? Should we look at them with a tad more skepticism? Feel free to let me know. This is your Alp Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.